All right, so here's something that you may not hear very often, or it's something that you may hear a ton. And if you're a parent, it's probably something that you say a lot of the time. Our words are powerful. They carry a ton of weight. Working with students, I address this issue almost weekly, all the time, with just the fact that our words have the power to either give life or to tear people down. And nowhere do I see that more than in my own home with my kids. I've got 5 kids, and I don't know, this may be hard to believe, but they're not always best of friends, especially when you got twin boys running around that just want to fight everybody all the time. And sometimes they know exactly which buttons to press to get those really hateful words out of their siblings so that they can then run and tell me or mom that their sister said that they hate them, or their brother said that they were a duty head, or whatever. I don't know. Insert your words that you hear your kids say that kind of drag people down, drag the siblings down. The truth of the matter is, in Scripture, it says that the power of life is in our words and in the tongue. And so we can choose to say things that are going to encourage and lift people up, or we can choose to use words that tear people down. Around here, we tend to focus on the words and the things that can build each other up and build people up. And that's kind of what we're going to be discussing and talking about today here in week 3 of our series, Throwing Shade. So why don't we hop on over and join Jeremy for our message today.
If you're here for the very first time, I'm sure that you've got questions about this group of people. I want you to know some things that we think are important for you to know. Is this, that we are not a group of people that used to be people like you. And this is not a group of people who try to just tolerate or put up with people like you. And we're not a group of people who try to fix or change people like you. What we are is a group of people who are just like you. Every single person in this room, every person who's joining us online right now has parts of their story that we wish we could change, right? There are things in my story that I wish I could edit or do away with. There's parts of my story where I believe and I wish I could just go back and put a box around them and hit the delete key. Forget they ever happened. There's such big parts of my story like that. But to be honest with you, there's more that I want you to know. We are a group of people who are very much for people. In fact, one of the codes that we live by around Journey is that we want to be known by what we're for instead of what we're against. Church is really good at that, aren't we? I mean, churches are really good at being known for what they're against. They're against these people or against this idea or against that thing. But I want you to know something, that we are very much a for people place. Not only do we exist for people, but we are on the side of people, and we are known by what we're for, because I think that's how God wants us to be known. He wants us to be known by what we're for instead of what we're against or what we push back against. We have this thing in our culture today. Maybe you've heard this phrase. You've heard this idea kind of based on this little utensil or this little, piece of hardware in your kitchen. I don't remember what that word is, but it's teapot and a little tiny teacup. Maybe you've got one of those in your kitchen, and maybe you've heard the idea of what it means to spill the tea. And I think this is one of the things, spilling the tea, that keeps us from being able to be for people. In fact, this idea of spilling the tea is really around the word gossip. And the phrase spill the tea, somebody says, hey, I've got some tea for you, right? They aren't talking about some sort of herbs dipped in hot water. They're not talking about that. They're not talking about a tea bag or hot water. What they're talking about is the gossip. What they're talking about is the word behind the scene, the thing that's going on with somebody in their life that maybe not everybody else knows, and that little bit of juicy gossip that happens. You see, this idea goes all the way back to, in England centuries ago when they would began to sit down for tea. They would sit down over a hot cup of tea and some hot gossip about people that were there. That is not a healthy thing, right? I don't think that we as a church or you as a human being can be for people and also for gossip, because it tears us up, doesn't it? It doesn't do us good. In fact, I want you to know something. If you're here today and you're a part of this online gathering or you're here in person, I want you to know that that you don't have to believe the way we believe to be a part of Journey Church. In fact, I want you to know that you can belong here long before you believe the way we believe. And this whole idea, right, if we're talking about this today, if you follow these principles throughout the book of Proverbs and throughout Scripture, even if you don't believe them, if you follow them, it'll just make you a better human. But if you are a follower of Jesus and you, like me, called to be for people, then this stuff is not optional for us. It's something that has to be a significant part of our life. If we're going to be a for people kind of place, then we have to be a people who don't tolerate gossip, because gossip only pushes people further away. So we all know some people who gossip, right? I mean, that's how it works, right? I know somebody who gossips, right? You know somebody who maybe shares too much or has a tendency to talk about other people, or maybe that has been your experience, that somebody's talked about you and it's really hurt you in your story, in your life. Or maybe you will be honest enough with yourself to say that, yeah, I struggle with gossip. I want to talk about people, and that's not very for people, right? I can't be for people and talk about people. We have to choose a preposition. We're either going to be for people or we're going to talk about people. And I want us to be the kind of people, the kind of church that is for people. And if we're going to be for people, then we can't be talking about people. But why is it so simple? Why is it so easy for us to do? It's so easy for us to engage in gossip and be a part of this, right? It's so easy for us to talk about people. It's because of this. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels, right? They go down to the inmost parts. There's something about the idea of being gossipy. There's something about the idea of talking about people instead of about things, talking about what's going on in somebody else's life. It's tasty to us. I was at a chance to be home last week in Northwest Indiana, where I'm from, is where the home of Albany's confectionery is. I mean, they make unbelievable candy. They make chocolates. They make all kinds of stuff. But the thing that they make the best is gummy bears. Now, these aren't those Harborough gummy bears. I don't like those Harborough gummy bears because they're hard. They're squishy. They always taste stale to me. But Albany's gummy bears, if I ate this one, I wouldn't be able to stop. In fact, this bag, when I left Northwest Indiana, had 2 and a little bit more than 2 pounds in it. And now it only has maybe a little less than 1 pound in it. I got another bag just like it with the sour gummy bears, and it also only has a pound in it. Because once I eat one of those gummy bears, I can't quit. It's just like gossip, isn't it? There's a part of us that goes, man, these gossip words are like tasty morsels, right? They're like these choice things that somehow, for some reason, something about the way gossip is shaped, something about what it does in me really connects. And it's so easy and so tasty to be a part of the tea, right? But I think there's a problem. There's a problem with it. Maybe we want to gossip because of something that's going on inside. I think there's some reasons why it tastes so good to us. I think there's some things that are going on. Maybe it tastes good, or it feels good, or it's that choice morsel to us because it just feels good. It feels good to talk about somebody else and to kind of deflect the attention away from ourselves. Isn't that really why we gossip sometimes? Or maybe we gossip because we've been hurt. Maybe you've been hurt and it feels good to hurt somebody else. Maybe you've heard that phrase. Hurt people. But does it need to be that way? I mean, just because it feels good or just because we've been hurt doesn't mean that we should hurt someone else. Or I think really the heart piece of it, or the real core piece of why we gossip, why we talk about people, is because we are prideful. There's something broken on the inside of every one of us. Now listen, I'm not talking about you people or those people or those people, right? I'm not talking about somebody else. I'm talking about me. I have really had to struggle through this week. The idea that I talk about people, and I've been examining my questions, examining my own conversations as I'm having them, and I'm going, man, why is it that I do that? At the core, I have a pride problem. It's really kind of interesting to me because Matthew says it this way. Anything that you eat, this is Jesus talking. He says, anything you eat passes through the stomach and then goes into the sewer. You see what Jesus has to do here? This is interesting. I mean, like when he's trying to connect with us on this one, he has to go all the way down to the basis of who we are. He says, anything that you eat passes through the stomach and goes into the sewer. But the words that you speak come from the heart. And it's those things that defile us. Now, I want us to get what he's saying. This is so important for us. So this is important for me. Even if you're not listening, if you're not paying attention, right, you're not into what I'm saying, this is important for me to get. I'm preaching only to myself right this very minute. Everything that comes out of my mouth actually comes from my heart. And so the reality is that if I have a word problem, that I actually have a heart problem. If I have a word problem, if I have a tendency to talk about people, and I'm going to put this out there, I'm going to throw shade in that way when they're not even around to have that shade thrown on them. If I have a word problem, then I have a heart problem. You know what I realized this week in conversations? Is that it is not only very easy to talk about people when they're not around. It's unbelievably common to talk about people when they're not around. It's hard not to talk about people when they're around. So we've got to ask ourselves something bigger, a bigger question. What is gossip about? Gossip is interesting because gossip says, if you are weak, I am strong. If I can push you down, I feel better, right? I remember a 7th grade teacher in my life who told me, you don't have to blow out my candle to make yours burn brighter, right? Gossip says, if you are weak, I am strong. But the gospel says, because I am weak, I have an opportunity. I can show his, Jesus, strength in my life. We have an opportunity to do something. And here's the question, as those of us who are followers of Jesus, those of us who want to live this out in our life, which of these two do you want to be? Do you want to be the person who says that I need to make you weak so that I look strong? Or do you want to be the person who lives out the gospel, lives out not throwing shade, but shedding light? And instead of being influenced by the world around us, like Chris talked about, we are influencers of the people around us. What if we brought light into the darkness? What if we were the kinds of people that says, because I'm weak, I have an opportunity to show strength? Because what's interesting is Proverbs says it this way: the tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. You're going to speak at some point. Are you going to bring death or life? Gossip says that you're weak. That makes me feel strong. But the gospel says that my weakness gives me an opportunity to share his strength. So what are we going to bring? And I don't think there's anybody who's listening who goes, oh, you know what? I'm going to bring death every time. I love bringing death. That's what I need to do. Because we don't recognize that what we say is really bringing death, do we? We have a tendency to not even really recognize how significantly our words hurt people. And it matters. Because look at this. It says this: a troublemaker plants seeds of strife. Gossip separates the very best of friends. Man, think about that. I mean, when you have an opportunity to share gossip, I want you to recognize something. When you speak that kind of death into the picture, what it does is it will separate someone from someone who's close to them. You're sharing it with this person and they're like, oh, really? Is that what I heard? I didn't hear that. I didn't understand that part. And it drives a wedge between somebody and somebody else. That gossip drives a wedge between people. It separates even the best of friends. Even separates like friendships that have taken decades to build. Maybe you know that. Maybe somebody shared some gossip, or somebody listened to some gossip, somebody engaged in it in some way. And at some point it separated you from a very old friend, a person that you'd invested a lot of your life into. Now let me ask you this question. When you share gossip, do you want to be a part of separating two really close friends? 3 really close friends who've had a lot of their life and put a lot of their dependency relationally on each other. Do you want to be a part of that? I don't know about you, but I don't. And I don't really think that I can be for people. If I can't be for people and so that kind of separation between really good friends. There's a phrase that goes back to like war times, and I think it's World War II. And when one group of people was trying to hide from another group of people, and they were trying to encode their connections in their transmissions, and so they didn't have the code, wasn't public, and so they said, "Listen, you've got to keep this code entirely to yourself, because when this naval strategy, if you were to breathe out this code, then they could decode our communications, and loose lips sink ships." That was the phrase. Maybe you've heard that. Loose lips sink ships. Well, it came from that idea of encoding transmissions. But I think it's true when it comes to gossip, because gossip will sink friendships and relationships. Our loose lips sink those kinds of ships. And we can't be a part of that if we're going to be for people. And we are a group of people who are very much for people, because that's not just what this church identifies with. Right? It's not just a value or a core around here for us. It's not just a code that we live by. Us being for people is a call of the gospel. That's who Jesus came to care for. He came to seek and save the lost, to bind up the brokenhearted, not to drive wedges and sink their friendships, their relationships. Look at what this next piece says. Honesty guides good people, and dishonesty destroys treacherous people. This idea that when we sow dishonesty, it brings all kinds of tension into the picture. It brings all kinds of wedges, and it kind of focuses out on all these things and kind of drives stuff away. You know what I think else gossip does behind this? Gossip erodes trust, doesn't it? I mean, like when we bring dishonesty, it drives people apart, right? It's like a wedge, and it's an undermining effort inside of trust. When you gossip, or when someone gossips about you, it erodes their trust in you, doesn't it? Let me tell you how. My wife says this all the time to our girls. We've raised 3 girls. They're 22, 20, and 17 right now. And we've talked a lot about gossip over the years. Over all those years and all of those conversations about gossip, my wife has said one consistent thing over and over and over again. If they will talk about someone else to you, they will talk about you to someone else. Let me say that again, because this is profound and super helpful as you raise your kids, but even more so as you think about how you can be for people. If they will talk about someone else to you, they will talk to someone else about you. That's a big deal, right? Because what we're really saying is that if that person's going to have a conversation about somebody who's not here right now, you can't trust them to go somewhere else and not talk about you, because that's how gossip works. It erodes trust. And the same thing's true. When you speak about somebody else, what you're really doing, it might seem like you're making them seem weak and you seem strong, but when you're willing to talk about somebody else, you know what it tells that person? It tells them that the minute you're not there, that you'll likely talk about them too. Because that's what it does. That dissension, right? That kind of divisiveness drives a wedge, and it erodes trust, and it erodes the relational foundation of this relationship. Like all of relationships are built on trust, aren't they? Our friendships built on trust. Our marriages built on trust, right? All of our relationships are in some level built on trust. And I want you to get something. When we erode trust, we erode the foundation of a relationship. And I want you to understand this even further if you're a follower of Jesus. Relationships are the core of what our influence is about. That you understand something. When you gossip, you erode trust. When you erode trust, you shake the very foundations of relationships. And relationships are the capital that we trade on to care about people and reach people who are far from God. So our gossip doesn't just hurt people, it hurts the mission that we're about. And we can't be for people and be parts of gossip. We can't do it. So what do we do differently? What is it that you and I should think about doing differently? How should we process differently? Like this last week, I've been thinking about it. Like maybe we should just not talk about other people when they're not there. Is that really even honestly possible? I thought through it just in my life, trying to live it out, and I'm like, man, it's hard not to talk about people, isn't it? And really what we're talking about, like we look back at that passage in Matthew, is we're talking about a heart problem, right? We can't treat a heart problem with a skin solution, right? We can't treat heart disease with a skin application. That's not how it works. So we can't just do something different. We have to be willing to evaluate some things. We have to be willing to do a little self-evaluation and a little look inside and see what's going on inside of our heart. What do we really want? About a year ago, Sheila and I bought our very first brand new car. We've never bought a brand new car, always swore it off like we'd never do it, but we couldn't figure out another way around it that was economical with all the things going on. Car prices were crazy up, used car prices were up to the point where it was just more economical to buy a new car, honestly. It was ridiculous, right? So we jump into the car for the very first time, hit the gas, and I recognized that on the dash there's this tiny little line. It kind of runs right over the speedometer. And if I'm driving economically, that line is green. If I'm pushing it a little bit, that line turns white, right? But if I'm pushing it hard, it turns red. So there's three kind of settings, right? When I'm driving this car, if I'm driving it kind of economically and I'm making the most out of the gas, it turns green. It turns white if I'm kind of pushing the edges, right? And it turns red if I'm pushing it too hard. Now listen, it didn't matter to me when gas was $2 a gallon. I'm like, meh, whatever, you just drive, right? But gas is like, $4.50, $5 a gallon, right? Like when it's this expensive, you watch every ounce. I mean, we're headed down a hill, I'm taking my gas off, I'll be like, we'll figure it out when we get there, right? So I'm watching this red, yellow, green, or red, white, green thing, and I have this picture in my mind. When it's green, we're good to go, right? When it's red, or when it's white, I need to ask why. And when it's red, I need to quit while I'm ahead. That's how I got it in my head, right? When it's green, I'm good to go, right? When it's white, I need to ask why. And when it's red, I need to stop, quit while I'm ahead. So maybe we need to develop a warning system like that. Like when we first start talking about people, we need to let that raise that kind of white flag for us. That moment where we turn on the caution light, that moment where we glance down and we go, okay, wait a minute. I'm talking about people right now. And I need to ask myself an evaluative question. Now there's going to be a point where the line turns red. And hey, look, I'm just gossiping. And then you need to quit while you're ahead. But when we bring up conversations about people, maybe we need to ask ourselves some real honest questions. And you can do this kind of in the back of your mind. I think there's just a few of them. The first one is, why am I really saying this? I mean, not why am I saying this because I'm letting them in on something, right? And sometimes we're going, hey, I'm just trying to vent. I'm just trying to get this off my chest a little bit. Maybe you're trying to cover it up and saying, well, I'm really just asking for their input. But we have to ask this question, why am I really saying this? Am I really saying this because I want to say something negative about somebody else? Am I really saying this not just because I need to vent, but because I want to complain about that person and I want them to think and feel the same way I am? Am I really saying this because I want them just to be on my side and I'm trying to convert them? You and only you can answer this. I can't tell you never talk about people again who aren't in the room because that's not a realistic expectation of people, but I can invite you into some Holy Spirit-led evaluation of your own life. Why am I really saying this? Am I really trying to build somebody up or am I really just trying to tear them down? And we need to ask yourself this question, why am I really saying this? I think the second one is this one. What am I really saying about this person? When you're saying something, did you hear what happened with so-and-so? Did you see what she posted on Instagram? Did you see what he said about that? Or did you see this issue? Did you see what they were saying? What am I really saying? Am I really just saying, oh, I'm just passing on the news, right? I'm just saying the things that are true. And that's usually our justification, isn't it? Our justification sometimes is that we're like, well, it's true. If it's true, it's not gossip, right? No, that's not true. Because what am I really saying about this person is you can't trust him. What I'm really saying about this person is they're not a good person. What I'm really saying about this person is I'm inferring something deeper. Here's a quote from Craig Rochelle. I think it's so powerful. Everything that you say needs to be true, but not everything that's true you need to say. Now, let me say that again because that's important for us to get. Everything that you say should be true, but not everything that's true needs to be said. What am I really saying about this person? That's a great question for us to ask. When the line turns white, we ask why. When we bring up the topic of people, we start talking about people who aren't in the room. What am I really saying about this person? That needs to be on our hearts. The last one. What do I really want this person to do with this information? These are questions I've been kind of wrestling through this week because it's inevitable that we're going to talk about people who aren't in the room. And I have to ask myself, why am I really saying this? What am I really saying about that person? And what do I really want the person I'm talking to do with this information? Am I saying it because I want them to join my side? Am I saying it like, are you covering up and saying, I'm just venting to my friends, I'm just kind of letting them go? What do I really want them to do? Do I want them to say, oh, you're doing so good, you're so great, you're right, they're wrong, right? Do I want them to say, you should delete their number off of your phone right this very second, right? Do you want them to delete the number? Do you want them to unfriend them or unfollow them? Is that what you really want? What do I really want this person to do with this information? If the answer to this question isn't encourage the person we're talking about, or pray for the person we're talking about, or care for the person we're talking about, if what you really want that person to do with that information isn't something that builds up and doesn't tear down, then the red light just went off. And when you're red, you should quit while you're ahead. You see, the thing is that tea, the gossip, the dainty, tasty little morsels, right? They feel so good. But that feeling is literally the work of the enemy. The word that Scripture uses to refer to our enemy, Satan, the original word used is diablo, and it is a compound word. Dia means to cut through, and bolos means to separate. So what the enemy does when he uses these dainty little morsels is to cut through and separate the relational foundation that connects people to people. I don't know about you, but I don't want to participate. I want to tap out. When it's yellow, when it's white, I want to ask why. I want to ask myself, what am I really saying? Why am I really saying this? What am I really saying about this person? And what do I really want this person to do with this information? Because that dainty little morsel goes all the way to the heart, and it winds up cutting through and separating people from each other and ultimately from God. You and I cannot be a kind of people who are for people if we're going to participate and throw in shade by gossip.